Hello, everybody. This is Jonathan Albin, Game Master J, with the NycosRPG Game Master Soapbox. This is my episode 3, and I intended to be on at 11 o'clock tonight. And, well, one thing came to another, and I'm a little bit late. So, even with that, those of you that are watching this on YouTube will see it at about the same general time as you did yesterday's show. But for those of you that are on Twitch with me, I apologize for being a bit late. As per usual, we're going to have basically 6 10-minute segments afforded to the subject that you see listed up here, and I will do what I can to answer any questions that come in via chat if they happen to during the episode itself. Now, having said that, I have been doing videos on Twitch for a while, and I've realized that many times the videos are unattended by other people, and that's mainly because I do a relatively short show compared to many of the others who take the advice of Twitch and do 2 to 4 hour periods and catch viewers in their second or third hour. And I don't know what that's about, but my purpose for doing these in particular is to hang on a second here, just hitting a screen here, make sure I'm in the right place. Alrighty, and my audio is good, so I want to check that as well. So having done that, then we can continue. The purpose for doing the Games Master Soapbox is kind of to cover a bunch of different topics. As you may or may not know, I've been game mastering for nigh unto 50 years. I've been saying 50 years for a while, but people have been pointing out that the property wasn't published until 74, so therefore this would be 49 years, and it more than likely 48 years. In my recollection, I was playing it before it was published, so this should be right at 49 years. But either which way, it's been as long as the Dungeons & Dragons property has been in existence and has covered every possible category and genre of role-play game that's ever been published. So it's a rather extensive group of games that I've run, and I'm probably one of the more consistent game masters with at least an average of 1 game per week for that entire period. So, having said that, we're going to be looking at the following topics today. We're going to look at Dark Shards rulebook, which is available now via NycosRPG as a you can either purchase it there as a PDF, or you can go to lulu.com and purchase the paperback copy, and the NycosRPG system itself and how those two are interrelated. We're going to be talking about the art of conflict balancing, the essence of being a game master that makes the difference between a total party kill or the feeling that the players are underplayed or underutilized. Then we're going to talk about the ways of resolving challenges, contexts, and conflicts in the NycosRPG system, and how other games try to resolve the same thing. My 1 minute rant today is die rolling shenanigans. We're going to go into all kinds of different ways people have made die rolling untenable or downright crazy making. We're also going to do a quick reminder and rather an extension of the information available on the Open Twitch experiment, which will be Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And then, of course, we'll have a period for potential questions and answers, and or we'll have perhaps some expansion of one of the other topics if players request it, or viewers request it. Players, reviewers, everything's a game, right? So, alrighty. So starting at the top, we're going to be talking about Dark Shards and the NycosRPG system. So NycosRPG is a mechanism, a role-play system that was created initially as a saddle system, and then eventually it actually replaces the system that it is if you will, riding on. We'll go into that mechanic here in a minute. The Dark Shards is the first of the published first of the purchased products in the NycosRPG system, and that's fundamentally because that's the root of most fantasy RPGs, is a singular source, and so the Dark Shards is a mechanism for introducing players to how magic works within the NycosRPG, but also how to deal with the basics of non munitions functionality and non munitions weaponry. So it deals with weapons and armor and group combat and all kinds of different categories. But Dark Shards is set in the shadow, if you will, of the Nykos game world. Nykos, as you may recall, is the fantasy roleplay environment that I created for my roleplay games clear back in 1974-75, and the story arc developed through my senior year in high school, and then we switched over to the next iteration. In other words, the story arc completed in my senior year in high school, and therefore our next iteration began shortly thereafter. And we have now processed through we are in literally the closing out days of the 8th iteration, and so with the 9th iteration we'll be playing fully under the NycosRPG. So the Dark Shards mechanism is set, if you will, at the beginning of the 9th iteration and resolves all of the character race, in this case character species descriptions, and that includes the extended group of 35 varieties of personas that the players can take on as their persona in the game. The essence of Dark Shards, that is NycosRPG, is the realization that combat needs to be more cinematic and less mechanical. It needs to be something that can be comprehended and understood in a framework of visual reality and the functions of how combat really works compared to the mechanistic roll the dice and crush the monster mentality of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and other roleplay systems going back over time. The fundamental element that's different is that without character classes per se, the persona that you take on can choose elements from each of the possible types of backgrounds, what are called in the lore the ways, and therefore once they've chosen the course or direction they wish to begin in, they then can progress as the player decides, given the parameters of what the game master gives as story points and such. So this Dark Shards book therefore includes all of the materials necessary to be a storyteller or a player in the system, and outlines the mechanism for creating a character, establishing a process for the advancement of said character on a self-regulating process so that the storyteller is not dependent upon for allowing the advancement of the characters. Now, it does leave the story more open to the manipulation or the control of the players in the environment, because they choose the direction they want to go with the materials, but the elements of story are still left in the hands of the game master. We don't want to go too much farther than that with this subject, other than to say that it is only the first of 6 already established genre that the NycosRPG will be embracing. I'm going to go ahead and run through all of them as a quick overview. Dark Shards, of course, is the fantasy setting. Downshift is the post-apocalyptic environment. Dread Signs is the mystery monster Cthulhu-ish kind of elements of story, including gothic horror and that kind of thing. Distant Suns is the science fiction, spacefaring environment. Pardon me. Deep state is the conspiracy theory / super spy element environment. Dawn Soldier is the World War II era Silver Age superhero environment. And I think that's the extent of the ones that we've got available. There are actually 20 already established for Roleplay Roulette, which is our showcase element that can show people how to roleplay in 5 to 10 minutes. But the downside, if you will, to Roleplay Roulette is that it's not fully formed and established. So the others that we've discussed are the ones that will be providing you with the tools necessary to expand your story into the environment. And mixing and matching them is how you'll be able to establish the perhaps specific genre that you as a storyteller want to address in gameplay. Alrighty, so now we're going to now step into the next subject. One of the biggest challenges of being a storyteller is determining how strong, how tough, how dynamically dangerous the villain that you create will be in balance to the number of players and the type of backgrounds and the skills base that they bring to the encounter. And the concept of conflict balancing is if you are running commentary that the storyteller has to go through as he's processing the adventure round by round or turn by turn, so that the players feel the stresses and the danger of the situation without overpowering them or undermining their ability to make decisions or to take away from them the agency, so that the story is seen as being their story as much as it is yours. The biggest challenge to conflict balancing, of course, is determining how fortunate or lucky that you wish, how much luck, in other words, let me rephrase that, how much luck or randomness do you want in the encounter, so that the players don't feel like it's a runaway either for or against them, and they don't feel like you've hijacked or undermined their ability to make their own decisions. One way to do this, of course, is to take the mode of current roleplay product out there, and that is to develop a combat rating or CR or difficulty rating or DR, depending on what mechanism you're using, to set those numbers into place in advance and then anticipate that the players will overcome the challenges or rise to the threat without worrying about the actual specific numbers, and thereby setting yourself up for a potential total player kill TPK situation or a royal rout. Players just run roughshod over the story at that point of conflict. And both of these are not optimal. Obviously, we don't want to, as a storyteller, you never want the story to end because you killed off all of the characters. On the other hand, if their choices have put them in a situation where the danger level justifies or warrants some kind of equitable retribution in the case of the bad guys, at the most extreme end, that would be the resolution. But of course, you could also reach a point where the resolution of the conflict needs to be adjusted. And to do that, that's where the art comes in. And the biggest tool that we have in that is the relativistic way in which we describe things. So, for example, if on the very first set of actions, the players are very clever and very astute, making correct decisions and putting pressure where they need to, perhaps it is actually destined to be a rout by the players. On the other hand, perhaps if you've set it up so that the scene they're trying to go into is detrimental to the story, or somehow you've lost control of the course of actions, and the players have set themselves up to dominate in the scene that doesn't seem to make sense to you as a storyteller, there needs to be ways to counteract that on the fly. And so the concept of conflict balancing is to start with, well, there'll be three things we're going to cover. The first thing we have to cover is that the very concept of conflict balancing means we need to be in control of the situation at some level, at least when we begin. So we have to have an idea of what the numbers are that the players are going to need to achieve each scene. We need to have ways of manipulating or moderating the damage that they do or the damage that they take. And all of these sound like, from a wishy-washy standpoint, it sounds like, well, you're just making stuff up, and many players would make that accusation at the time. But the reality is that the role-play environment is a commonly held thought experiment. You want it to be as dynamic as possible. They want it to be as exciting as possible. You want it to be as threatening as possible. They want it to be as acceptable as possible. And so you've got to kind of balance those together. So the first thing you got to do is make sure that your initial numbers are somewhere close to ballpark. If you're looking for parity, then you look for exactly the same numbers that the players have to deal with. If you're looking for a healthy imbalance that leads the advantage to the players, then you produce base numbers that are slightly lower. If you're wanting a more excessive challenge or something that might threaten them, at least with one or two potential character injuries or whatever, then you skew to the high side on behalf of the bad guys, so to speak. And that's only the first part. The second part is mitigation, and that has to do with what the conditions were that the players are fighting under. If it's even Steven and the fight is kind of being bland and boring, feel free to toss in some conditions on one side or the other or both that help to adjust the excitement level, maybe putting the players in theoretically more danger, or conversely making it more difficult for them to achieve their goal, depending on the objective. Then finally, the last part of it is that if you've got those two, the last thing is to determine your resolution. And in a lore setting way, people always say the performance isn't over till the fat lady sings. Well, in the case of a conflict, if there is a trigger that is supposed to happen, monitoring when it happens and how it happens gives you a way to, at the last minute, push the button on the fight, pull the plug on the fight, whatever you want to say, and put the players back into non-combat situations rapidly, therefore avoiding the sticky part of the end of the battle. But this conflict balancing is also to apply not only to combat, but to other RP setting situations, such as conversations with bad guys or information gathering with non-player characters or researching in the library. All of these things can be adjusted on the fly by modifying what's necessary to roll, or conversely choosing which rolls to accept and things like that. So for more information on this, you'll definitely want to get Your Life, Your Game, Your Move, a book that I wrote on the games business, which is available at lulu.com, or you can also pick it up, I believe, through Amazon. Or for a more concise version, pick up Top of Your Game, The Guide to Winning at Everything, another book that I've written that's available both through Amazon.com and through Lulu, which is my publisher. Alrighty, we're coming up on the beginning of the 1 minute rant, so let my clock wind down here to the beginning of the next minute. The 1 minute rant today will be on die rolling shenanigans, and I'm looking at you players that are in my games right now, and if any one or more of these apply to you, yes, more than likely realize that I am aware of what you're doing or what you've been doing and why we need to stop them. Alrighty, 1 minute rant. Dice rolling shenanigans. In every role-play game, and more than likely just about every board game as well, dice rolling is a part and parcel to the way the engine runs. And The actual numeric values on the dice will vary from scene to scene and episode to episode, character level to character level. But what I'm talking about in particular in my 1 minute rant today is the very concept of die rolling itself. Now, those of you that have ever watched one of my roleplay games, I personally prefer an open hand rolling system. Dice are in your hand. You shake them, you open your hand and roll them on the table. You cast them on the ground so that they skip and bounce across the floor, across the condition. Now, some people use a die rolling tablet. I tend to use a polyethylene or Game Master mat, like a card playing deck mat made out of polyurethane. And I roll on that, and the dice will cast across the distance. The rules for rolling dice from a mechanistic situation means there's no rule that says you must roll open-handed like that. There's nothing that keeps you from shaking the dice and dropping them on the table, or shaking the dice and pitching them out one at a time. My recommendation, open hand roll all the dice that you're needing to roll at the same time so that there is no confusion. So that the first thing is the way you roll. If you roll in a suspect way, like dropping them on the table or laying them down quickly or whatever, you draw suspicion to yourself and you make it more difficult to believe that your die roll is legitimate. Next die rolling shenanigan amongst these is the concept that, actually I'm over my minute. I'm going to go ahead and go through this. This is going to have to change this to 10-minute rant. The second methodology of die rolling that's a menace and needs to be stopped is the concept of utilizing dice that have really filigreed faces and are indecipherable except to the person who owns the dice. This is a problem in a role-play game environment because it is, unfortunately, if you're doing a role-play game properly, the die rolls should matter some to the story, and therefore the die rolls should be easily interpretable by anybody at the table. And that's why in my games now I've established a single die rolling surface. And so anybody that would hey Zelda, welcome. We're talking about die rolling, and I'm in the middle of a rant, so hold on to your hat. So die rolling with dice that have really arcane and intricate faces, that is awesome for your collectors. I've got several different sets that have this. I have a Lord of the Rings set. I have a arcane emblem set. I even have one that doesn't even have pots on it. Oh no, you're not interrupting at all, Zelda. You're part of the conversation. I'm very much a two-way person, kind of communicator. So although I've got a rant going, I'm more than willing to engage with you. So thank you again. So the second thing, the first thing is the funky dice rolling. If you're going to drop them on the table, if you're going to slow roll them or pitch them one at a time, those are all bugaboos for me, but that all falls into the die rolling process issue. That's the first part of my rant. Second part of my rant, oddly faced dice with weird shapes on them. That makes it really difficult to read and for other players to verify. The third is die rolling mechanism. Cool. Glad you learned something about it from the game today. Go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll talk about it as soon as I finish the rant here. The third thing is the way you pick up dice. Be kind if you're a person rolling dice in a game, and leave the dice on the table for perusal in case somebody, including the storyteller, needs to look at them. I know that sounds a little selfish. It sounds a little protectionist, but if you're in a game of mine and you've been rolling really successfully, dice roll after dice roll after dice roll, there's going to be an inclination to doubt or challenge what you roll. So leave them on the table and let the storyteller, or at least others, verify the dice rolls. So that's the third of my dice rolling rants. And the other thing is, don't roll dice until it's necessary or the game master calls for it. I know people that will sit there and they'll roll the dice in front of them until they get a good number, and then they'll hold back and wait. And then as soon as the storyteller turns to them, they'll say, "I rolled an X. Did that work?" And it's like you haven't even role played the environment. So why is the dice roll even made? It's just a peccadillo. Yes, everybody can have their dice rolled anytime they want to, I suppose. But from a GM standpoint, don't roll them until it's called for. So that's the. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. So that dice rolling has its shenanigans. They need to stop. Simply roll the dice. If you want to, open-handed, in any other way, drop them all at once, and then let the dice sit where they may, and make sure they're a readable dice face, so it makes it easier for everybody to read. So, all right, so that completes my dice rolling rant. Now, we're going to talk about the open Twitch experiment, but I want to respond to Zelda. Zelda Potter says, anti-magic fields don't shut down artifacts. I have a Mask of the Dragon Queen, and was able to still use the legendary resistances against something that was going to shut down spellcasting for 10 turns. Well, shutting down spellcasting for any length of time is really a detriment to casters. So the way in which artifacts engage with the environment is solely at the hand of the game master, and it may be, I can't speak for certain, but it may be that in the rulebook it does specify that artifacts are immune to that. However, I have a feeling, just my inclination, that the game master has accepted or chosen to institute that rule to make it more amenable for you to finish that part of the story, to make sure that you can get through it, and that's awesome. I don't know that it's always the case. I do know that Nycosian artifacts do have problems with anti-artifact magic or anti-runic magic or whatever. Each type of magic has its own counteractions, and so that may or may not be the case in every campaign. But that's great. Cool. So what effects do the mask have other than giving you the legendary resistance? Yes, having the legendary resistance is the ability to say, I failed, but no, I saved instead, is absolutely useful. I do remind you want to go ahead and use the dice roll and then ignore it, because if you make the dice roll, then you don't have to use the legendary. So just realize that sometimes you can be tricked into using up a power on an item that way. So just make sure that if you have a saving throw available, that you take advantage of that in the roleplay situation. So, alrighty. So what I want to talk about for the next part here is the open Twitch experiment, and what I'm doing on Twitch starting on Saturday morning, that as far as I can tell, I haven't seen anybody else doing this, is that I want to engage you as viewers as players in the Saturday morning game. So when I start playing at 10 o'clock in the morning or so on Saturday, we'll do some session 0 stuff, setting up the campaign, but our intent is to have viewers like yourself come on and play. Okay. Oh, okay, cool. She's listed the abilities of the Dragon Mask. That's awesome. It is a lot of things. Yay. That's cool. You must be near the midpoint or so of the campaign for you to already have the artifact. That's awesome. So the open Twitch game on Saturday, you won't need any materials at all. If you want a character sheet, they're available from NycosRPG.com, which is my website. You can just download the player character profile or persona profile, and that's a 3-page PDF document. The version that's there right now is not currently fillable, so you'll have to download it, print it, and then write on it with paper and pencil. I know that sounds arcaic, but that's the way of it. Unfortunately, I'm not enough of a savvy person to have a fillable version yet. But you don't have to have that. We'll be able to play online without having a character sheet. But if you wish to follow along and have your character as part of the story, you'll definitely want to download the NycosRPG. Okay, I got you. Oh, okay, I got you. That's cool. Okay. So in the environment that Zelda Potter is playing, they're able to use magic items that they create in a PvE environment. That's awesome. I've never played in that framework. I have played with several game masters who prefer to do battle with each other in such a fashion. It's long form is my cup of tea. So the idea of a long-term campaign to get items and such is more my role, so to speak. So the next thing about the Open Twitch game is because it's set up to be run in the NycosRPG, we won't be addressing material from any of the published role-playing product from anybody else. But the book was also available from the NycosRPG site in the PDF form, or you can go to lulu.com and put in my name, Jonathan Albin, and get a hold of the NycosRPG paper-bound copy that they'll ship you. Cool. That's awesome. That's awesome, Zelda. Next part about the Open Twitch RPG experiment is that the game session ostensibly will be running from 10 o'clock until 2 in the afternoon, assuming that we have enough players to maintain it. If we have a drop-off or a shortage of players, I will at least run for an hour or 2 hours to do the session 0 material and go over some of the lore in the background and get the characters set up, with the idea that the following week will be the first week of the campaign. But notice that what I'm doing here is that I'm providing the system to role play with me as a game master. Even if you don't have a way to communicate directly, you can use the text box in Twitch to provide information about what your character is doing each turn. Because it's going to be at the speed of text, theoretically I'll be able to keep up with 6 or 8 or 10 players, because I have to kind of literally read one post at a time. And so therefore it should be able to flow fairly smoothly at that level. But as an added bonus, I do have a way for you to become a participant online with me and actually be a part of the broadcast itself. And that is, my Patreon program has a $20 entry per month level. And if you become a participant at that level, you become an official citizen of the Nykos realm. You get access to my Discord channel, and through that, then you have the ability to contact me. Hey, Pokey Niner. All right, nice to see you. Welcome to the channel. Yeah, I do ads. I'm sorry, ads only for my own product, and that's because this channel is set up to talk about it. But anyway, that's only for the Open Twitch RPG experiment, which will be on Saturdays, and anybody can play just for hopping on, and you don't need the materials to play. So, as a quick recap, we have covered a bit about the NycosRPG system and what the Dark Shards book is about, and why it may be useful. We've talked about the art of conflict balancing. How do you keep a story going and keep the danger level high without overpowering the characters and putting yourself into a total party character condition. We talked about the concept. Oh, we didn't go into this part, and that is, I want to talk about the types of conflicts that you have in a game. I list them here as challenges, contests, and conflicts. And the challenges in other role-play games, usually these are considered to be your skills checks. And in NycosRPG and in the role-play games that I devise and run, the challenge is just that. It's a die roll against a skill level with any modifiers based on the condition of the roll. So, for example, if you are opening a chest and you have a skill in lock breaking or lock open, you simply roll against that skill, and if you roll that number or lower, you successfully open the chest. Now, most games stop there, but in NycosRPG, you also look at the dice roll from a quantum die rolling mechanism. If you don't know what that is, I did a greater detailed explanation of that on yesterday's program, but the quantum die rolling fundamentally is this. Every time you roll a dice for a percentage check on anything, you actually are generating not one but four possible answers. Actually, five possible answers. One is the perfect roll, which would be a 0, 1 on a percentage dice, and 1 out of 100. That's pretty darn rare. I know it sounds like it's only 1 in 100, but mechanically it's been quite a few more hundreds, than just 1 out of 100. Second is a double down success, and that is you take the value that you are targeting. Let's say your percentage chance is 30, then 15 or lower on the dice is a wild success. So wild success is your second possible, like an extreme success. Then the next is a nominal success or a normal success, and that would be also known as a straight success, and that would be the targeted number down to that double down value. So if it was, again, 30, it'd be from 16 to 30 would be a regular or nominal success. And then from 30 to 60 is a partial success. And therefore, on one die roll, you have potentially 5 different results that can come from it. And on a check roll, any success is a success. So the storyteller will tell you if the difficulty, for example, if you're going to open a lock and it's a simple, single key, no tumbler lock, then you simply roll your percentage dice, and on a partial success or more, you're able to wiggle it free and open it. If it's a more challenging lock, they'll say, well, it's got to be a straight success or better, in which case then no partial successes might work. And then ultimately it can be a very sophisticated lock, in which case only a wild success or greater, or wild success or less would succeed. This way, therefore, you can see a sophistication difference between different ways of doing things. So, for example, it might be a difficult lock requiring a standard roll or higher, but it might be a fragile mechanism, and therefore you could actually use a die roll and break the item open easier than waiting for the lock to get picked. But it's therefore up to the players how they want to do that. So the checks are therefore a percentage dice basis with the idea that a partial success, a regular success, a wild success, and a perfect success can all come from a single dice roll, other than, of course, the failures that might occur from that. Now, the second kind of encounters are contests. And a contest is when unlike skills are either counter agencies or counteract the agency of the first. So, for example, a player who has a skill in evasion is attempting to evade capture by somebody who has a skill in tracking. When you have counter agency skills, each player should have an ability to make a check against a die roll. So, in the first case, let's say you got somebody who's evading and somebody who's trying to capture. The 2 die rolls are simultaneous chronologically, so they both roll at the same time, but you resolve both die rolls at the same time too. So player 1 rolls his dice and gets a partial success. So he's rolled higher than what he needed to make the success, but he is less than double that number because he got a partial success. So he's partially getting away, if you will. In the second part, the pursuer rolls his dice, and he also gets a partial. Well, both of them get a partial, means that the relative distance between them hasn't changed, and with that relative distance being the same, the conflict continues. Both of them have to take a tick of fatigue as they're having to exert themselves to reach that level. Next round, same thing. They each roll. Let's say the evader rolls another partial success, but the tracker makes a wild success. Well, that wild success is a 2-step improvement over standard. So they've got the standard and the wild success over the partial success, and therefore it's 2 steps closer. The fatigue on the evader is increased because he's got to actually run faster to keep the distance, and therefore his fatigue would go up by 2 instead of by 1. Whereas because it's now being done under the advantage of the pursuer, he doesn't take any fatigue loss, so he stays maintaining the 1 fatigue loss that he had. Third round, the person who is running gets a wild success. And unfortunately, the pursuer rolls a failure. Well, anytime it's a clear succeed or fail, the conflict is immediately resolved at that point, and any conditions that were in place are suspended for the sake of the conditions. So in this case, the person was evading succeeded, the tracker failed, therefore the evader got away, and that resulted. It's done. He got away, and so there's no pushing beyond that or whatever. Whereas in the case where there's at least one type of success, you can have the distance between them increase or decrease. The amount of energy each is expending can increase and decrease to the point where the players have to choose whether they want to break it off and such. So that's the mechanic for a contest. You just roll against your personal skill and compare the relative responses to that of the opponent. Now, next is conflicts, and in a science fiction environment, this might be a hacker trying to hack into a system that has an active counter agency involved, and so they are both conflicting with the same skills base. This would also be it could be extended to combat, especially in ranged combat, because your action really isn't actually a hand-to-hand you're not actually in combat. You're actually just resolving the actions at conflict level, in which case you just roll for each one, and then the relative success fail again applies. But in that case, you could actually have 2 successes or 2 fails, and it's only called off when one of them, when either one of them calls off the challenge, because you could sit and shoot at each other until somebody actually successfully shoots somebody, or maybe you get shot with bullets and you still keep going even though you're wounded. So those kind of conflicts don't necessarily end until a player chooses to. So conflicts don't have a terminus as the other 2 do, other than the player's agency. Then finally, combat. In combat, it is 1-to-1, and the variation between the successes determines the amount of damage being done, because a person who succeeds at a higher level actually deals damage by that difference, and then resolves whether or not he wants to do damage or affect the condition of the opponent. So maybe you'll be disarmed, instead of taking damage, he knocks the weapon out of your hand, and so on. So that kind of thing is handled using still a comparative, but the relative comparison is the damage being done. A little more brutal. You end up with more wounds perhaps than you would like. But next week we'll probably talk a little bit about the actual combat and what the outcome of injuries and such are. But this is the material that I intended to cover. I now have some time if you guys want to go over anything in particular. Zelda or Pokeniner, you got anything you'd like to ask, request, suggest? Feel free to do so. Those of you that are not yet commenting in the comment section, make sure you do so that I know that you're here. If you like what you're seeing, make sure that you like the channel. Click the subscribe button so you'll get notifications whenever I create new videos. If you don't like what you're hearing or whatever, thank you for your time for listening thus far, and I will definitely be able to communicate with you in the next show. Games Master Soapbox is held every day, ostensibly at 11. I got to a late start today, so we started at about 11:30 or so. So we are a bit over our time for what we wanted to do. But we will be back again tomorrow at 11. If you do have any questions, feel free to post any questions in the comment section down below, or you can reach out to me at NycosRPG on YouTube, NycosRPG on Facebook, and at NycosRPG on Twitter. if there's anything else, feel free to reach out to me. I am Jonathan Albin. This is Game Master Soapbox for the NycosRPG. And I did have to mention that my little logo down here in the corner, right there, is the emblem for the game store in Redlands, California, Board Games Paradise, who is one of my sponsors and for whom I run role-play games on Mondays and Tuesdays. They are live games, and so if you would want to come and participate, feel free to do so. They're on State Street in downtown Redlands. Make sure you look at boardgameparadise.com or look for more information at NycosRPG.com. Thank you very much, and you guys have a great day.